Thank you for sharing so many stories. I keep hearing these super inspirational stories that it's so heart moving. So I appreciate all that. I see some familiar faces here, and we are running a lot of these clinical diagnosis, and we run clinical trials in our hospitals, but a lot of time we tend to miss like the more human part of it. And I thank you so much for actually sharing that with us. So today we're going to start our talk with four fantastic speakers on navigating your new diagnosis. I'm not sure, should we have all of them here or one by one? How do you guys want to do it? Let's bring all of you guys. So let's try with Dr. Laura McAdam, that you already know is the Director of Ambulatory Care at Holland Bloorview, Kids Rehabilitation Hospital, Associate Professor in the Department of Pediatrics. We also have Megan Dickson, who is the genetic counselor working with us at SickKids Hospital. She earned her Master's Science Genetic Counselor from University of Toronto in 2022, and she remained as an inpatient genetic counselor. And then she actually joined us recently to our neuromuscular clinic. Thank you so much, Megan, for helping us in that direction. We have also Iris Garcia, who is our social worker at SickKids, working in neurology since 2002, right there. She has honors bachelor's in arts and master of social work. She's basically really invested in theater and like super humanistic things. Like she's super nice to have her. And lastly is Charise MacDonald, who is occupational therapy, has worked more than 10 years experience in working in pediatrics. She has been the part of the neuromuscular team at Holland Bloorview. And I think this is a good example of how two institutions in the same setting, they work together. Like we do diagnosis, we also work with Bloorview, with other centers as well, but with really closely with Bloorview to actually try to support you in the new diagnosis, and eventually who is going to be your team trying to support you, not only from the physical component, but also from the more human point of view. So with that, we are going to start with the first of our talks, which is basically with Megan about diagnosis on DMD. All yours. This. Hello, hello. All yours.
All right, so it's so lovely to be a part of this wonderful Duchenne community today, and so thank you so much for having me speak today. Over the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to be speaking about navigating your new diagnosis from a genetic counseling lens, so a lot of the basics, genetics 101. All right. If I can skip to the next, is it this way? Okay, clearly I'm technologically challenged, but we've got the next slide. So dystrophinopathies are caused by genetic variants, or the other term we use is mutations in the DMD gene. And just so we're all on the same page, dystrophinopathy is an umbrella term that includes Duchenne on the more severe end of the spectrum, and then Becker on the more mild end. And then we do have clinical presentations that exist all along that spectrum, and in the more intermediate phenotype or presentation. And the DMD gene encodes the protein dystrophin. And dystrophin plays an important role in many parts of our bodies. One of the most important roles is skeletal and cardiac muscle. And so if we zoom in on one muscle cell, you can see that dystrophin is sitting just inside of the cell membrane. And its role is to actually help anchor the muscle cell to the extracellular matrix or outside of the cell. And dystrophin is a really important protein to provide shock absorption or stability every time the muscle contracts. And so when there's a problem with dystrophin, you can imagine that when the muscle contracts, it can cause damage over time, and this is what leads to muscle fragility and ultimately fat replacement over time in various different groups of muscles. And so people with dystrophinopathies all have disease-causing variants in the gene DMD that ultimately affects the dystrophin protein. we go. And so the DMD gene has 79 exons, and exons are subunits of the gene that ultimately result in the production of the protein dystrophin. And so you can see that the exons are labeled from 1 all the way to 79. And the majority of people with a dystrophinopathy have either a duplication, so extra, or deletion of 1 or more exons. Okay. And this ultimately will lead to either little or absent dystrophin production or an abnormal dystrophin protein. And so in general, the distinction between Duchenne and Becker muscular dystrophies is whether or not the genetic change causes the exons to remain in frame or out of frame. And so on the top left corner of the screen, we can see that there's a deletion of exon 45 to 50. And so when you delete those exons, you can see that the puzzle pieces don't fit together. So you've got 44 on the left hand and 51 on the right, and they don't connect. And so when the body tries to read through the gene, it actually is no longer able to read through that gene, which will lead to very little or absent dystrophin protein, which is why when this happens, that's when you see the more severe or the Duchenne end of the spectrum, because we actually don't produce any dystrophin protein. Versus an in-frame mutation or genetic variant, if you delete exons 45 to 47, for example, you can actually see that the puzzle pieces or the exons still can fit together. And so the body is able to read through that gene and produce some sort of dystrophin protein. It's going to be abnormal. It's going to be missing important parts of the protein, but your body still will make some protein. And so that's what we typically will see on the more mild end, or the Becker phenotype. I will say that in general, this is a general rule. There's, of course, exceptions to this. So speaking with your own healthcare provider about your child's genetic variant and their clinical symptoms is very important. And then there are a smaller proportion of individuals with a dystrophinopathy that have a sequence variant. So this is a variant that doesn't actually impact the number of exons, but if you zoom in on the exons, our DNA is made of nucleotides or letters, so A, T, C, and G, and it's strands and strands of those letters. And so sequence variants occur at one letter, okay? So this is an example of a genetic variant where we can see at position 8,713 letters into the gene, a C is changed to a T. Okay, so in healthy individuals, they typically will have a C, and when we switch it to a T, that's going to have an impact on the way the protein is made. And so we can see that P dot, that just stands for protein, and the amino acid is arginine. And at that point in the protein, the protein cannot be read beyond that. That's what the star means. It's a stop codon. And so that is going to result in an abnormal protein. And so I just wanted to cover the difference between deletions and duplications of exons, but also the possibility of sequence variants. And in fact, 2 different genetic technologies will detect those different types of mutations. And so when you're looking for a genetic cause for a dystrophinopathy, it's really important that if you've had the technology that looks for deletions and duplications and something wasn't found, that you do make sure that there's been full sequencing of that gene to look for these types of variants. Okay. So in order to understand how dystrophinopathies run in families, it's important that we have an understanding of chromosomes. And chromosomes are the structures that hold all of the DNA. And we each have 23 pairs of chromosomes in every cell in the body. And 1 copy of that chromosome pair comes from the egg, and the other copy comes from the sperm. And in males and females, the chromosomes numbered 1 to 22 are the same. And then the last pair of the chromosomes is what determines biological sex. So biological females, or females at birth, have 2 X chromosomes, and then males have an X and a Y. And the DMD gene is located on the X chromosome, which is why males only have 1 copy of the DMD gene, but females have 2. Okay, and this will be important when we talk about the difference between a carrier and then an affected male. And so when we see an affected male in clinic, 2/3 of the time, mom is a carrier. And carriers have a working copy of the DMD gene and a non-working copy of the DMD gene, because carriers are females and they have 2 copies of the X chromosome. And most females don't know they're carriers. The majority of females will go their lives without knowing and developing symptoms. However, there are some symptoms that we do monitor for, so I'll talk about that a little bit later on. And then when mom is a carrier, with each future pregnancy, there's a 25% chance to have another child with a dystrophinopathy. Okay, and then 1/3 of the time, the variant occurs de novo. And what de novo means is that it was a spontaneous mutation and not inherited from a parent. And when you have a de novo mutation or mom tests negative, the chance to have another affected child is a little bit more complicated, and it's due to the fact of something called germline mosaicism. And so what germline mosaicism is when a genetic variant is present in more of the gametes or egg cells or sperm cells. So in the case of dystrophinopathy, it would mean that there's extra egg cells in mom's ovaries that have the mutation or genetic variant. And we also call this gonadal mosaicism. So in the picture here, you can see that mom, when we test her, she's got 2 working copies of the DMD gene, but it's very much possible that mom's ovaries have extra egg cells that do harbor the mutation, okay? And it's really difficult to predict who can have germline mosaicism, so when moms test negative. However, it's predicted based on publications to be about up to 15% of females who test negative have germline mosaicism, which means that there is a possibility, even when negative, to have another affected child with a dystrophinopathy. And there's no way to know which female is a germline mosaic and which female isn't. And if you are a germline mosaic, we have no way to know how many eggs have that mutation. Okay. So I want to move on to talking a little bit about the genetic results. But before I go through a sample genetic result, I do just always want to advertise that everybody should have a copy of their genetic result. And so if your healthcare provider hasn't provided you with the actual copy, you can ask for that. And same with mums, to ask for your carrier status. So you can ask for the actual report versus a written summary. So sometimes you'll get like an after visit summary, but make sure to ask for your actual report, because this allows you, if other family members want to be tested, they need to actually have the real report to provide to their doctors to get tested, to know exactly what to look for. And then, of course, if you have questions about your child's specific variant, talk to your healthcare provider. And if you have not yet seen a genetic counselor, certainly ask your healthcare provider for a referral. Not every family doctor or pediatrician is familiar with genetic counselors, and so you can always look up a clinic near you on the Canadian Association of Genetic Counselors website, and you can see there, find a clinic. Okay, so here's a sample of a DMD report. And so this is the SickKids report. It's an older report, but it should all have the same amount of detail on the report, whether or not you had it done at SickKids or anywhere across Canada. You can see that at the top there that I've underlined MLPA. That is just the name for the technology that can look for deletions and duplications of the exons. But it's also important to have sequencing if a deletion or duplication is not found. Okay. On the report, you can see that it says hemizygous. That's just a fancy term to say that there's one X chromosome and there's one Y chromosome, so a male, and that the variant is present on the X chromosome. And then usually there's a summary or a table that talks about the specific mutation. So here we see exons 45 to 47 are deleted or missing. And the interpretation of a genetic variant is really important. And we can see here that we know it's a classified pathogenic variant. We've seen this variant numerous times over in people affected with a dystrophinopathy. So we know that this genetic change causes the gene not to work. Some people may have a variant of uncertain significance in the DMD gene, which makes things a little bit more complicated. And so that is important to speak to your provider as well about that and interpreting what it means for your child. Okay. And then the MLPA results will always have a reading frame prediction. And so we can see that it's in frame, predicted to be in frame. And so we talked about how that means that with the exons, they still fit together like a puzzle piece. And then there's always going to be a paragraph that outlines what's been seen in the medical literature for the particular variant before. And then lastly, every genetic report is always going to recommend that there's some sort of genetic counseling to discuss the implications for your child, but also other family members. Okay. So who else in my family should consider genetic testing? So it really depends on if mom is a carrier or not. And so if mom is a carrier, each of her sisters have up to a 50% chance to also be a carrier. And so if sisters are planning pregnancies, that's really important for them to be aware of, as well as we're going to talk about how being a carrier requires some health screening for your own self. And then mom's mom should be tested or offered testing because of the risk that she also is a carrier. And then the other thing that we typically talk about in clinic is siblings. And so it really depends on siblings' ages and whether or not they're symptomatic or not. So certainly boys, depending on their age, may or may not be recommended to have genetic testing or at least have their CK measured. And then sisters, if mom's a carrier, each have a 50% chance of being a carrier. And so certainly talking with your healthcare provider about when's the best time to test your daughters. And then in terms of a de novo variant, mom's sisters are not at risk. Mom's mom is not at risk to be a carrier. But it's more so remembering that some females, even though it's de novo or appears to be de novo, can have germline mosaicism. And so we don't want to miss daughters who could be carriers, even though it appears de novo. And so daughters would be eligible for genetic testing, although talking with your healthcare provider about timing is important of when that would be best to do it for your daughter. Okay, so in terms of what does it mean to be a carrier? So most female carriers do not have the muscle symptoms that affected boys do. However, there is an increased risk for cardiomyopathy. And so that's a disease of the heart muscle wall. And females should be having lifelong cardiac screening. It typically begins around late teens to early adulthood. And so any female that is at risk of being a carrier, even if they choose not to do the genetic testing, should be having their heart screened. And then we talked about risks to other family members and then future reproductive implications. And so just to finish off in terms of what are my future reproductive options if you're planning more pregnancies, there's now the option to test before a pregnancy, or I shouldn't say there now is, this has been around for some time. It's through in vitro fertilization or IVF. And we can actually test, once the sperm and egg come together, it creates something called an embryo. We can test the embryo for the genetic variant to determine if the embryo has the DMD variant or not. And the goal would be to implant embryos that don't have the DMD variant. We can test during pregnancy, so you would get pregnant naturally, and we can do either chorionic villus sampling or amniocentesis. These two procedures are an invasive procedure, so you're going into the pregnancy to either take a sample of the placenta or the amniotic fluid. And then we test that biopsy or sample for the DMD variant. And this would be considered diagnostic. So it's a yes or no answer as to whether or not that baby has the DMD variant. And then, of course, there's other options. Some families consider no testing. There's also the option of using an egg donor or adoption. Okay, and there's no right or wrong way in terms of what to do if you are considering another pregnancy. It's really unique to each family's personal values and preferences. All right, so that's everything that I was hoping to share with you. Thank you so much for your time today, and I'm looking forward to meeting some of you around. Come say hello, and feel free to ask any questions about genetics that come up.
Thank you so much, Megan. We'll do questions at the end, if that's okay with everybody. So we'll do round questions. And our next speaker is Dr. Laura McAdam, that I think we introduced her several times, and everybody knows her really well. Laura, thank you so much for being a speaker. So all yours.
I'm going to stand up there because I can't see that very well. So, and there's an extra screen over here. That's what happens when you get a little older. All righty. So today, right now, I'm going to be talking a little bit of navigating your new diagnosis for Duchenne, and I really appreciate Megan talking about Duchenne from a genetic perspective. Your genetic counselor is your friend. They are extraordinarily knowledgeable, and I really would encourage anyone here today, if you have questions, to reach out to her throughout the day today. So when I'm talking about your new diagnosis, I'm going to go through several different components, and really I'm going to do a little bit of repetition, because we know when you're diagnosed, you get so much information thrown at you in a very short period of time. So I'm just going to highlight some of the key things that Megan was talking about, and I'm also going to touch base from a psychosocial standpoint, so what Iris is going to definitely talk further about, as well as what Charise is going to talk further about from a rehab standpoint. So where to get your information? You all are going to have a care team. So when you're going through your through the diagnostic process, you're going to meet several individuals. Know that you can reach out to them at any time. When you have a question, write it down, because it always comes in the middle of the night. Send an email in the middle of the night. I know people won't be getting back to you in the middle of the night, but then at least you know that you have voiced your question or your concern or your worry, and someone from that team will get back to you. I also want to stress that there are some incredible advocacy organizations, both within Canada, within the US, and throughout the world. And these are just a few of them. So I don't want anyone to think that this is an exhaustive list, but there's a lot of good quality information out there. But the caveat is there is a lot of inaccurate, out of date information that you can also find on the internet. And so really think about what you are looking at and making sure it's coming from a quality place. And if you don't know, speak to your care team. They can help guide you. They can point you in the right direction. So understanding the diagnosis, things that we've talked about, there's Duchenne and Becker muscular dystrophy. We know that they are genetic disorders. We know that the DMD gene is on the X chromosome. It primarily affects males. We've talked about females that can be carriers. And in the broader grouping, these are dystrophinopathies. So the DMD gene encodes dystrophin. And these are important words to make sure that you're familiar with. When we're thinking about DMD, we talked about the reading frame. This picture is from the Defeat Duchenne website. It's really showing the exact same concept, in that the DMD gene has these 79 pieces. They fit together like a puzzle. So they have to be, the pieces have to be fitting together. So an example for Duchenne is a deletion in exon 50. And if you're looking at it, 49 and 51, those two puzzle pieces don't fit together. And so that means you're not making your protein. And we know with Duchenne, we see weakness at a younger age, and we see a progression or increased weakness at a younger age compared to Becker muscular dystrophy. When we're thinking about Becker muscular dystrophy, because there may be some of you in this room that have Becker or online have Becker muscular dystrophy, in general, there's an in-frame mutation. So in this example, deletion of exon 50 and 51. And if you look at those two puzzle pieces, 49, 52 fit together. So that means that you're going to be making some protein, but it's just not as functional. And I really want to highlight there are so many genetic mutations that we see in this DMD gene because it is a massive gene. And so that's when you can speak to your neuromuscular team, your genetic counselor, to understand what that means for your child or for you as an individual with Duchenne or Becker muscular dystrophy. So care at diagnosis. Either you as a parent or your physicians that you've seen in the community start to wonder about something going on. And so things that parents have told me about is there could be some delays in development, there may be speech delay. I'll come back to some of that later. You may be noticing differences in muscle function. Someone might have commented, or you might have noticed yourself, that there's some enlargement of the calf muscles, which is called pseudohypertrophy. When you're seeing a doctor, sometimes the neuromuscular doctor, or sometimes before you get to the neuromuscular doctor, they'll check something in your blood called CK, or creatinine kinase, and this is going to be increased. I'm bringing in a different concept here about transaminases. So transaminases are enzymes that we can measure in the blood that most people think come from the liver, but they also are expressed in the muscle. So these will also be elevated. I remember several years ago when I was talking to a family about this, I had a mom say to me, "Oh," she says, "so that would be elevated in me." She happened to be a carrier. And I said, "Yes." She said, "That explains why a doctor kept on asking if I was an alcoholic." Because they had had persistent transaminitis or elevated ALT and AST, which we can also see for individuals that drink a lot of alcohol, but it had nothing to do with that. And that was such an important revelation for her, and she's like, okay, now I understand. So I think that's just a really important thing, because many doctors, especially in an emergency setting when they're having to think about so many different things, they don't link those two concepts together. And that's also why it's written on this emergency card that you have from Defeat Duchenne, just as a cue for the physicians that are seeing you. And it's not something to worry about. The liver is okay. This is coming from muscles. And you hear so much information at the beginning of your, from a diagnosis standpoint, that this is something that can easily be missed. Then comes confirming the diagnosis. So we've heard about genetic testing, and occasionally individuals will also get muscle biopsies. And your neuromuscular specialist is going to help make those decisions as to if that is appropriate for you as an individual. Now, this is a very big slide. And so when we're talking, after you've been diagnosed with Duchenne or Becker muscular dystrophy, there are a lot of guidelines about medical management. And my key point here is your care team is going to help guide you through this process. You do not need everybody that's in all of these small circles immediately or all at the same time. The key thing you need is you need to have a team that's engaged. There are many teams across Canada that know a lot about Duchenne. If you're in a community and you don't have a clinician that knows about Duchenne, they have to be interested. They have to be interested to read, interested to learn, and then you're going to be setting yourself up for success. And over the years, you'll see on the bottom, transitions across the life course, you are going to have different physicians that are involved in your care. And so it's really working collaboratively with your primary team to get the right people involved at the right time. And if you have questions about this, I can absolutely go through this in greater detail. The other thing I just want to reassure everyone about is there is tremendous amounts of research. So the care guidelines have been transformed over the last 18 years that I've been in this field. We are more organized, we are more knowledgeable, and care is changing at a very rapid rate. You're going to hear about some of this today with all of the drug therapy trials that are going on, as well as industry, but even outside of industry, how we do things in Duchenne is changing. And so it's really about having those active, engaged healthcare professionals on your care team so that you are understanding where things are evolving to. So in the early years, for individuals who are younger and diagnosed with Duchenne, so between 2 and 4 years of age, it's important to stay active. And your care team is going to be able to help guide you through that, because how active is active enough? How is being too active, is that going to have a negative effect on my muscles? But in reality, we want individuals with Duchenne being active. And so have these discussions, express your worries. You're going to hear a lot about stretching. So we can see fibrosis or scar tissue in muscles, and so we really want to keep as much flexibility as possible. There's some excellent videos online on Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy, but also within your care team or your rehab team, they can help guide you with this. It's important to talk about eating healthy. It's important for all of us, all ages. But when we think about some of the side effects of steroids, they increase your appetite. You can gain weight on steroids. So it's really about thinking about getting good routines in place at home, as well as outside of the home, to stay healthy in general. This is also the time to learn about your diagnosis. Ask the questions, re-ask the questions. Everyone is here to talk about it, to educate you. There's no way you can memorize everything that you've heard, because there's such a great volume of information that's being shared with you. And this is also time to think about emotional and family support, and Iris is going to talk more about this. This is really key. My last slide is going to come back to this in community. Steroid management. So right now, we are working on other treatments from a research perspective, but steroids are the gold standard of care. That is what we have right now. If you notice on the slide, I just mentioned deflazacort and prednisone. We've all heard about the incredible news that Health Canada has approved vamorolone, and we're going to be hearing more and more about that throughout the meeting, both today as well as tomorrow. So I'm not going to focus on that right now, because we're talking about what we have right now in clinic. And so steroids, there's a reason why we use steroids. There are benefits. The benefits outweigh the side effects. There are many side effects. I can't look at any of you and not say that there are not side effects, and there are a lot of significant side effects, but we also see significant benefits from steroid treatment. And then I've just put on the top steroid, corticosteroid, glucocorticoid, they all mean the same thing. So depending on who you talk to, you're going to hear different words. And then the two types that in general we use are deflazacort and prednisone right now. But this is changing. So why steroids are beneficial? You walk longer. They really help slow the changes that's happening in your muscles. When you're older, it helps preserve your arm function, so your arms are stronger. We also know it slows the breathing muscle weakness that comes. It slows the heart muscle weakness that comes. And it also helps avoid surgery. So individuals that are treated with steroids, about 90% have scoliosis, or their back leaning to one side or the other side. But with corticosteroid treatment, it's down to about 10%. So it doesn't make it zero, but it definitely reduces the risk of development of scoliosis. So these are the benefits, or the reasons why your physicians are talking to you about steroids. Oh, this big slide. So steroid side effects, so many, many side effects. I've talked a little bit about weight gain, and that's why we talk about proactive, healthy eating habits. If you look a little bit to the side of that, we talk about adrenal suppression. There's going to be an excellent talk by Dr. Ward at the end of the day today when you're completely exhausted, but she is going to talk about adrenal suppression, and this is essential information. If you do not have a stress dose steroid plan, you need to speak to your primary care team to get one. Once again, these emergency cards, it talks about adrenal suppression and the importance of having a stress dose steroid plan. Also at lunch today, 2 of the nurses from our team are going to be out there, I'm not quite sure where, they'll have a table set up. So if you don't know how to give injections of stress steroids for severe illness, they will teach you. And then you can also go back to your care team and get that learning reinforced, or if you need prescriptions from them, you can ask them about that. When we're looking through the steroid side effects, there are a few other ones I just want to highlight. Bone health, many of you may wonder why people keep on talking about calcium and vitamin D, why we're doing x-rays and bone densities. It's because we know in Duchenne, your bones are a little bit weaker, also in Becker's. However, when you start treating with steroids, they can affect your bones. There is a difference with vamorolone that will be talked about later. So if any of you have questions about any of these steroid side effects or are wondering about them, please come up, speak to myself, speak to Dr. Gonarowski. We'll have other physicians throughout the day that are here. And make sure you ask your questions so you understand the impact that'll have or could potentially have on your child or on yourself. Immunizations. So before you start a chronic corticosteroid, we need to make sure that you have had your live vaccines. So as part of your immunization schedule, there are some vaccines that are live, and so that's your MMR or your measles, mumps, and rubella, and your varicella or your chickenpox vaccine. When you're on chronic corticosteroid treatment, you should not be getting these live vaccines. So we want to make sure you've received them before you start. And so I talk to a lot of families about getting these vaccines around 3.5, because at least in Ontario, your second dose of this vaccine is at 4 years of age. But if we're thinking about starting steroids at 4 years of age, I don't want that to be the reason to delay. There are other live vaccines, but the vast majority of vaccines are not live vaccines. So one, it's a little out of favor now, but the intranasal influenza or flu vaccine, that's a live vaccine. We don't recommend that. And then the rest are more around travel vaccines. So yellow fever, there's a typo there, but oral typhoid, I don't know what aura is, but oral typhoid, cholera, and tuberculosis are the other live vaccines. Rehab. It's important to consider rehab. So these teams can include doctors. So I work at a rehab hospital, physiotherapists, occupational therapists. It may include speech therapists, dietitians, orthotists. So those are people that make braces. They could be recreation therapists and youth facilitators. So some of your kids may meet some of those two individuals from our team that are out in the child and teen room. And really, this is focusing on what your goals are, your interests, lifestyle, optimizing quality of life. So that's what your rehab team is going to be focusing on. They're also going to talk about range of motion, so that's that flexibility at your ankles, exercise, stretching, and different equipment. I wanted to just take a few seconds to talk about the brain in Duchenne. This is not going to do it justice, but we know dystrophin is expressed in the brain, and when you have a change in the DMD gene, then that means we can also see an impact on development as well as behavior. So this is a busy slide, but really the key thing is if you as parents or if you as an individual have Duchenne and you're wondering if you're experiencing any symptoms in these areas, talk to your care team. They may not be the people who diagnose these conditions or look into them, but I just really want you to know that they are associated. So we see higher rates of ADHD, autism, learning disability. So this may not be evident until you're in your middle school or high school years. We see more anxiety disorders. We see speech delay. Some kids with Duchenne, this is their first presentation, is an isolated expressive language delay. This is related to Duchenne. Obsessive compulsive disorder, intellectual disability, and depression. And so it's one of those things it's important that all of you are aware about, and just know that there is support within either your core team or your broader team to look into these different comorbidities or things that can be associated with Duchenne and Becker muscular dystrophy. Emotional and family support. So DMD affects everybody close to the family. And we heard that today, and we will keep on hearing that today with all of the speakers that are up. And it's important to build a support system, and that is going to look different for each and every one of you in this room. Here are some resources. I've also typed out a sheet that has links to all of these different websites. So if you're interested, I can give them to you. You can also reach out to the Defeat Duchenne team and they can send it to you by email. But here are just a few of the books that exist out there, because I frequently get asked the question, how do I talk to my child about Duchenne? How do I talk to their siblings about Duchenne? And so I think it's about finding a resource that makes sense for you. And so these are just some of them, definitely not an exhaustive list. Education. Talk to your team about daycare, school. Talk to your daycare and staff about your child and what some of their needs are. I know on our team we provide letters to daycares as well as to schools, just talking about some of the considerations in the classroom, in gym for participation, recess, inclusion. There are also some great resources. So MDC, Muscular Dystrophy Canada, they go into schools and talk to both teachers or classrooms. Incredible resource. They also have a muscle facts book, so if your school is more interested in paper stuff, you can get a copy of this and provide it to them. On Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy, they have a whole book about education matters for parents and teachers, about diagnosis and early childhood. Amazing ideas in all of these resources. And it's really about finding what speaks to you as a parent and what works for you as a family and highlighting that. On the Holland Bloorview website, we have Project Inclusion. Some schools have challenges figuring out how to include a child. They have modules for teachers, modules for educators made by educators, so that it'll speak in their language to really think about inclusion both in the classroom, recess, gym, and what that can look like. It can really spark ideas. Teachers also can get a certificate so they can use that for their promotion as well. Some practical and financial considerations. This is just a list of different potential applications. I just really want to highlight the disability tax credit is based on function. It may or may not, when you're first diagnosed, you may not meet the criteria, but it's important to have these ongoing discussions with your care teams. There's also a medical expense tax credit. So maybe not as important when you're 2 and 4 years of age, but if you have medical expenses, and we know deflazacort's expensive, you can actually use that when you're as a medical expense when you're submitting your taxes. And this is across Canada. There are also different provincial and territorial supports, and over the years, accessible parking permits. It's really talking to your care team and letting them know where there are challenges or what you're experiencing, and they will have ideas and point you in the right direction. Last slide, community. Everyone's community is different. Find your community. It could include your immediate and extended family members. We always have an open invitation in our clinic. So if you want a grandparent to come, they're welcome. Aunt, uncle, they're welcome. Neighbor, they're welcome. Whoever is important to you is important to us from a care team standpoint. And so if they're your support, or if you feel that it would be beneficial for them to come, invite them, because they are going to be the ones that are supporting you over the years. Your educational community, your religious or cultural community, recreation. I highly recommend thinking about fun. So on the bottom is the 6 F's, and this helps guide us. And so all of your children, or you as an individual, have a passion. Follow your passion. We have incredible artists that we've seen over the years. We had someone that loved the trumpet, and they were in a jazz band and played in clubs. We had a classical guitarist. So to me, it doesn't matter what your interest is, but follow it. And try and create those opportunities so that they're able to learn about their passion, whatever it is. And if you're hitting barriers, you've already heard today, there are organizations that can help with that. Your care team can help with it. Our job is to reduce barriers. Your job is to tell us what's important to you, your child, you and your child. And we also have all these advocacy organizations that are also supporting us from a broader community standpoint. So just know we are all here to support you. It is a hard journey, We know that you and your entire family are affected, and we just want to be there to support you in a way that's meaningful for you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Laura. Okay, so we're moving to Iris, our social worker support. And I'm not sure if you want to talk there or here. It's up to you. Go, come to stage. All yours.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us here today, and it's so lovely to meet you all. My name is Iris Garcia, and I'm the social worker for the outpatient neurology clinics at SickKids, including our neuromuscular clinic. So today I will be talking about navigating diagnosis of Duchenne muscular dystrophy. Okay, so the initial disclosure. So understandably, this is a very pivotal moment in families' lives and understandably very overwhelming. Many thoughts and emotions are going to come up during this time. And so I always tell families there's no right or wrong way to feel. Every feeling that you're going to have is very valid. So there may be grief, there may be guilt, sadness, anger, relief. So it will take time to process that. So I think it's honoring those feelings, giving them space, and being kind to yourself. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. Like I mentioned on the slide there, processing feelings and emotions will take time, and it's a journey. So you really have to kind of give yourself that patience and that grace throughout this journey. There's going to be ups and downs and plateaus, and that is okay. Okay, so how do we discuss with others? So obviously with our child, how do we have this conversation? I know Dr. McAdam talked a little bit about that. There's different resources that you can access, whether it's books, there may be videos. Also seeing if your care teams have, say, social work support, who can support in helping with that conversation. I think the biggest thing to think about is making sure when you have these conversations is to make them developmentally appropriate. Children are gonna have their own kind of idea of what they want to know, and I think it's important knowing that they will notice the change in their body, or they're gonna notice any differences in terms of their abilities with their peers, so they are aware. They just may not have the language to be able to ask you what's going on. So it's important to include them in this process, but the best thing is to meet them where they're at. Some kiddos just wanna know what the name is, and that's okay. Others want to know a little bit more detail, and that is okay as well. The other thing is, a lot of these conversations will not go perfectly, and that is also totally okay. You don't need to have one conversation and it's done. You can have multiple conversations. And if you're feeling nervous about having it, again, speak with your care team, see if, again, there's social work, or even if your physician or whoever a part of that team can support you in those conversations. They can be that support system when you have that. The other good thing is that they can support in answering any questions that your child might have, and you're like, I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is. And that's okay too. Say you choose to have these conversations at home, whether it's with your child who has DMD or their siblings, and they ask a question, you're like, oh, I have no idea. But why don't we write this down and we can ask the care team later, at your next appointment. So it is okay to take your time and, take it day by day as a family. And in terms of others, who is relevant to share, it's going to be up to you as a family and your child as well. I think kind of a good rule of thumb is in places where you want to ensure your child's safety and that they're also going to be able to engage in spaces. it may be important to tell those people. So it could be the teachers, if they're on a sports team, a coach, their music teacher, whatever's relevant. Is also kind of important. And it's good to include your child again. They may only want certain people to know or certain information. And so as a family, you can work together to figure out what works best. Okay, so creating community. Creating community, as we can see here today, is very important through this process. And there's always different ways of doing that. So there obviously are social supports, whether it's informal, so it could be, again, family, it could be loved ones, it can be friends, again, sports teams, bands, things like that. And then there's also obviously more professional supports out there, or other more organized supports that you can access. But the idea of the importance of creating community is to create belonging. Everyone wants to belong. Everyone wants to feel valued and important. And so it's really important to provide those opportunities or seek out those opportunities for your child and for yourselves as well in a parent or caregiver capacity. And in terms of creating that community, that can also be programming. So engaging your child in programming. I know some families, they get really nervous to do that. They're nervous to send their child to school or engage them in programs, but I really, really encourage to actually let them do that. They're still kids at the end of the day, and so we want to create those opportunities of normalcy and being a kid. So, and also in terms of programming, it's also very good for socialization and general child growth and development as well. And when we are engaging in these community spaces, we really want to advocate to make sure that they're accessible. So that would be advocating and collaborating with different program providers, whether it's the people who are running the programs your child is engaging in, or extra supports that can support in facilitating these accessible spaces is going to be really important. And also just making sure they can understand how your child can be best supported. I know there'll be another presentation in terms of education and such, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. But the biggest thing is when it comes to school and daycare, you want to work with the staff so that they can understand your child's needs and how to best support it. So it could be including, discussing about the diagnosis, what that looks like, how it may progress, and obviously updating if there's any changes. Sometimes schools aren't understanding in terms of that. For many diagnoses, it can progress, so you kind of have to give them that little bit of reminder if needed. In terms of daycares, I know within provinces and even regions, it may change a bit, but it could be worth discussing if they have resource consultants or in schools, if they have particular team members within the school boards that can support in terms of just ensuring your child has the most appropriate supports in place to help them. And again, in general, for families, it's important to communicate and collaborate to find these services and tools to support your child in their academic and social success at school. There's lots of different resources. I won't go too much into it, but again, it's just important to engage in credible resources, so ensuring that you're getting the best support. And lastly, self-care. I know that's a big buzzword right now everywhere, but it truly is quite important. So that will include our physical, emotional, and spiritual health. So, as caregivers, making sure you're also taking care of yourselves. It's a tough job being a parent. You put 150 billion% of your love and efforts for your children. And so I always tell families that, when parents are superheroes. I know that sounds very cliche, but it's the best way I can say it. Parents are superheroes. But the biggest kryptonite is burnout. So if you're not taking care of yourself, it's going to be really hard to take care of your children. So make sure that you're also tapping into your supports to make sure that you're taking care of yourselves. Again, whether it's making sure you're going to your physicals, making sure you're going to the doctor if you're not feeling well, taking breaks, talking to your support network, engaging, if spirituality is important, engaging in those communities as well. Talking about, again, creating community and a social network. They always say it takes a village to raise a child, and so please ensure that you are creating that village for yourselves. Again, it can be a combination of informal supports of family and friends. It could be new friends that you meet at wonderful events like this, and it could be other professional supports as well. We talked already about processing emotions, and it's an ongoing journey. And self-compassion is super, super important. So I always, when I explain this, whether it's to children, youth, or parents, and we talk about it, we kind of break it up. So self, we're looking at ourselves as an individual, and compassion, being kind to ourselves. Giving ourselves that grace, reminding ourselves that we're going to have good days, we're going to have not so great days, but we have people and pillars that we can rely on to support us in continuing to grow the resiliency that we have in ourselves. And the big thing that I really try to support families and highlight is trying to find the glimmers of hope. So what are those things, despite all the obstacles and the scary moments, that we can bring out these glimmers of hope to help keep us going, to help keep our child going, our family going, our friends. So big thing is staying present. We often, just by nature, think about the future and the past. The problem with that is that we can't change those things. We can't foresee the future, but we can't change the past. So what we can do is stay present. Okay, so stay present in those moments, feel those feelings, talk about people, engage in these moments, and you're really going to find life is going to be a lot more fruitful for you and your family. The other thing is remembering and figuring out your child's strengths, uniqueness, interests, goals, all these things that are outside of the diagnosis. I always say the diagnosis is part of our child's identity, but it's not their whole identity. They're still going to have dreams, they're going to have crushes, they're going to have attitudes, they're going to be their own person outside of this. So make sure that you're highlighting that, encouraging the opportunities for them to grow and do the things that they want to do. And you're going to see, again, all these fruitful and wonderful moments throughout this journey. And that's all. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Charise. So the last one, but not less important, Charise, our from Bloorview, physiotherapist, where we work really close to her. Do you want to talk here? All yours.
Hi. Am I speaking? Hello. Okay. I'm Charise. I'm an occupational therapist on the neuromuscular team at Holland Bloorview, and I'm going to talk a little bit about rehabilitation early in a Duchenne diagnosis. Maybe. This one. There we go. I also have problems with technology. So we know, and it's been said, that a new diagnosis is overwhelming and that there's a lot to learn as a family and lots of new information. So ideally, along with your medical team, your rehabilitation team can also support you to navigate practical next steps. So I'm going to talk a bit about getting to know your team, the 6 F words, staying active, fun and recreation, as well as energy conservation. So as Dr. McAdam mentioned, your rehabilitation team will include many different professionals. It could look different based on where you live, and your neuromuscular rehab team may be your primary therapist or may consult to other therapists closer to your home. The roles of therapists can vary center to center, but generally occupational therapy and physiotherapy will complete physical assessment, looking at strength, endurance, and range of motion or flexibility, teach stretching, provide education about movement and energy use, learn about your home and school environments, learn about how your child helps to take care of themselves, and can support with developmental monitoring and assessment as well. Along with the rest of your rehab team, your occupational therapist and physiotherapist will support you to problem solve, adapt, and adjust to changes over time. And building a relationship with your team early can help making asking questions and navigating changes easier in the future, as they'll already really have a sense of who you are and what's important to your family. And ideally, this is a team that's going to be able to support you to problem solve and adjust over time. So the F words, as Dr. McAdam mentioned, the F words of child development provide a framework for a holistic approach to rehabilitation and care. It encourages your team to explore and recognize a lot of different factors of your family and child. So we look at functioning, so what your child does and what he likes to participate in. Family, the people who create the essential environment for your children. Fitness, which includes both physical and mental well-being. Friends, we know friendship is a really important part of childhood. Fun, childhood is all about fun. And we really feel that your rehab team can have a role in supporting your child to participate in activities that they enjoy. And future, so thinking ahead about your child's dreams, goals, and hopes. So I know Iris talked about some of these factors already in her presentation, as did Dr. McAdam. So I'll talk about it a little bit more. So OT and PT can be resources to support physical fitness, especially early on, but throughout your diagnosis, we really want to continue to support your child to be active, move and play within their energy levels and interests. We encourage low impact activities like swimming, walking, cycling, play, whatever they enjoy in playgrounds. Swimming is a great activity because it can be modified and continues to be safe over time, and provides a lot of different opportunities for movement, but really whatever they enjoy is the most important and best activity. You may be told to avoid some activities, something maybe high impact or high resistance, but that's something that you can talk about with your team specifically. And we want to support your child to participate in a way that they enjoy and that makes them feel good about themselves. So how your child feels about themselves is really important. So they should do things they enjoy that make them feel good. And if you notice that certain activities are more challenging, talk to your team. Often we can suggest different ways of doing an activity or really similar activities so they can continue to participate in what they love. So play and recreation are important. Recreational activities help kids to make friends and stay connected, build their own community, and are really important to your child's well-being. We want to help your child to explore their interests and try different activities. And many activities can be modified or done in different ways so they can continue to participate over time. As Dr. McAdam mentioned, we have clients that love art, fishing, photography, video games across the board, but whatever they're interested in. And the other piece is that sport piece. So there may be specialized or adaptive sport programming in your community. So if your child isn't enjoying the physical and sports-based programs that maybe they used to with their peers, but continue to enjoy sports and want to play, adaptive programming can be really good opportunities to support participation in community. So best to ask your therapy team for information and resources about what's available in your community, but some national programs include Volt Hockey, Challenger Baseball, and Power Wheelchair Hockey. You know, we know that kids with muscle weakness get tired faster than their peers, and still want to do a lot. So energy conservation is a tool that can help your child to participate in the activities that they need to and want to throughout the day. And learning how to make decisions around use of energy is really important and can be hard for kids to do. So you might have to help them learn how to listen to their bodies and learn when to take breaks. So energy conservation is a tool to do that, and I'm going to talk about it in a little bit more detail because I think it's a word that's used a lot, but it's not often explained. So the first thing is to recognize when your child's body is tired, and it can look different in each child, and you likely know some of the signs that your child's body is tired. But sometimes we'll see changes in how they move, so maybe different walking pattern, reaching differently, different signs. Leaning against you, slouching more when they're sitting, increased trips and falls, sometimes decreased self-regulation and increased tantrums, asking to be carried or use a stroller or wagon or a mobility device if you have one, and avoiding activities or choosing not to participate. And so energy conservation is a really important tool because we want kids to keep participating. It's our goal. So when we talk about energy conservation, we often will break it into, talk about the 4 Ps. So there are pace, prioritize, plan, and position. So pacing is taking breaks or slowing down, which is important for rest. Ideally, your child can take a rest before they're too tired. So we don't want their body to be really, 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 really tired and then rest. We ideally want to build some rest in earlier so they can continue to participate longer over time and don't need as much of a recovery period. We know it can be challenging to stop an activity and take a break. So sometimes it can be helpful to come up with some preferred rest activities ahead of time so that you already know what rest looks like and what those activities are, or to build a little rest activity kit that you bring with you on outings. Prioritization is considering which activities are most important to your child and your family. So for example, if your child has a birthday party, but they also go on a walk with you to walk the dog every weekend, maybe you'll skip the dog walk so that they have more energy to play at the party. It's just deciding which activity is most important when you're choosing how we're using energy. Planning is considering your schedule and routines and making changes to save energy. So for some families, it means getting dressed and doing everything upstairs before we come down for breakfast, so we're not going up and down the stairs multiple times in the morning before school. And positioning is about how your body is and where it is in space. So we know some positions require our bodies to work harder than others, and an important part of energy conservation is selecting positions where your body is well supported. So this could look like making sure your child's classroom chair fits well, that they're well supported at school in their desk. It could look like sitting at the table and baking together as a family, but at the table instead of standing at a counter. And can also look at starting to explore specialized medical equipment and devices as well. So this is kind of a brief introduction to some of the early considerations and things to think about with your rehab team, and obviously will support and evolve over time. That's it.
So now we move the most important part, which is probably your questions. So if anybody has a question here, if not, I'll just start with one question eventually for the team. So I think we got lucky, at least in Toronto, that like probably the median age of diagnosis maybe 10 or even 15 years ago was around 6 years of age. But now, like at least at SickKids, when we receive a referral from a pediatrician, we see that we are actually doing diagnosis way younger. And I think that's a lot of thank you to you guys that actually have educated the community. Now I think the pediatricians, the community knows way more about Duchenne and detect the signs really early. So now we have, at least in Toronto, doing diagnosis around 2 to 3 years of age. And one of the things we see is that, I mean, we don't start steroids, at least the normal steroids, until like 4 or 5 years of age. And one of the questions that the parents ask us as soon as we do the diagnosis is like, what we can do. Like, because, I mean, you're not going to start the steroids right now, like, what are we going to do? And the parents, of course, are really eager to do these things. And you have a 2-year-old that is like like jump in there. Like it's not that you can actually put him on physiotherapy right away. So my question for eventually Laura and Charise is like, what are the key things that you think when you actually give a diagnosis, what the families can take home to say, okay, these are the things I can start doing? And
I think I'm really going to highlight what Iris was talking about. I think this is the time for self-care. I think it's the time to learn about your diagnosis, sit with your diagnosis, and create your community of whatever that means to you. Because I think what we heard about this morning is the intense grief that you feel around the time of diagnosis. Also the relief that you highlighted because you knew something was going on. You just didn't have a word to describe what it is. So I think this is a time to, when you are ready, when you've had the support you need, to really sit and have some self-compassion. So those years between 2 and 4 years, and start thinking about how you're going to have those conversations with your child, with their siblings. And speak to your care teams. And I think Charise brought up some excellent ideas around energy conservation and starting to notice. Right? Notice when your child is tired and creating strategies that work for them, because we know every child is different. And you'll have many well-intentioned healthcare professionals, but we don't know what it's like day to day in your home, in the daycare, in the school, what you're seeing. And so really taking all of these nuggets of information and figuring out what it means for you within your family. And I guess another thing I just want to highlight is it's okay if it isn't the right time for you to have your emotional support that you're going to need. And I find different parents need help, or not need help, request that support at different times throughout the journey. And so just really recognizing that everyone within your family is processing this in their own personalized way. So I guess like I really feel these younger ages is to gather information and create your circle of support. The other thing is a lot of families ask about supplements or other ways to help support the muscles. And I think this is talking with your care team and seeing where that fits for you and your child. I mentioned a little bit about bone health. Get on that vitamin D. Everyone, regardless of Duchenne, should be on vitamin D. I should be on vitamin D. You should be on vitamin D. We live in Canada. We don't have a lot of sun. Thinking about calcium, getting those dietary routines in place, because we know some kids love sweets, some kids, and so just kind of thinking about it, because we don't want to say no, but we want to make sure that whatever patterns we're creating, they're going to be healthy patterns over childhood. I don't know, I'll hand it over to you, Charise. Do you have any? Yeah.
I think you covered a lot of it. I think the only thing I would add is families have lots and lots of questions in those early years. So I think the benefit of building your care team early is you can ask those questions. So there are some families who have 2-year-olds who want to talk about home accessibility, and that's okay. And there are some families that don't and want to talk about something else, or who are reviewing emergency precautions. And so I think that relationship is really important early on, so you can kind of ask the questions that you have and build the relationships over time.
yes, Mike.
Oh, okay. Again, this thing. Okay. About the care coordination that I saw at Dr. Laura's slide, I'm still quite confused who is the care coordinator. So if you could just point me to the, we have lots of people, but I feel that I'm the care coordinator so far. So I would just like to know, where should I be looking at? Thank you.
So true is all I have to say. I think families absolutely are coordinating a significant amount of care. And I think across Canada, there isn't a lot of funding for like a specific person as your care coordinator. I would love to evolve healthcare for individuals with complex or chronic conditions, that we actually had a more systematic way of creating care coordinators. But I do find frequently in different teams, like your neuromuscular team, that they do help coordinate care or ensure that all of the different aspects of care are being looked at. So I know when I'm seeing patients, we talk about in general overall how they're doing, but then I also just touch base of, I see you've been seen by cardiology, or ooh, it looks like this is a little bit late, so let's make sure that link is actually happening. And same as from a bone health standpoint. And I find on teams, sometimes it's a nurse, sometimes it's a clinic coordinator, sometimes it's a social worker, sometimes it's a therapist. So I think it's a good question to ask your team, who is my point person? And how can we look at care from a holistic standpoint? I don't know if that helps your answer, but I think it's also asking our teams that are involved.
There's a question over there at the end.
Megan? I have a duplication of 3 and 4, and I'm trying to understand if it's Duchenne or Becker's. Just wondering what would be my process in finding that out.
You want to take it? So I think actually I'm going to throw that specific question. In terms of, we always think dystrophinopathies as Duchenne and Becker, and that's the classic how it's been described. And I think we need to start understanding it's actually a spectrum of a condition, that you can have a really severe Becker or a really mild Duchenne, because it's not only about the deletions and the area where it is, or eventually if it's framed out of frame, which is actually really important, but also where it's actually located. And we'll talk about a little more about tomorrow when we think about gene transfer therapy, what we are actually looking into the protein, understanding a little more the biology in it. I don't have in my top of my head like the 3 to 4 there, and it will really depend on what your clinical symptoms. But it looks like more a Becker for me, but I can't actually say. I mean, I can discuss later with you a little more in details. Duplications are tricky though. It's not, I have seen patients with duplications that, depends where it is, they are completely normal, even without even high CKs, and the only thing they have is exertional rhabdomyolysis. Basically, when they do exercise, high peak in the CK, and then way back, and even normalize it, which is super rare. Like, duplications they work in a weird way, and I don't think we still understand completely the duplication component. But happy to talk later. Any other questions? Yes, over there. Yeah, sorry, left side, I didn't see, sorry. I'll go back to the left side in a second.
Okay, so is this on? Yeah, okay. They had mentioned earlier about flu and vaccines. I know like our regular pediatrician had told us to get the yearly flu shot. So should we? I was kind of cautious because I know I don't like getting it and I've had side effects and I'm a carrier. And I was just like, I don't know if this is safe for them.
Thank you for that question. So I do want to, so on my slide, I was just talking about the intranasal flu vaccine, which is live. But the other vaccines, so the ones that are for injections, are not live vaccines. They are very safe to give within Duchenne. I do actually recommend annual flu shots. The flu shot changes every year based on what type of influenza we see circulating in the community. We know individuals with muscle weakness are at higher risk, so there's a higher chance of influenza settling into the lungs and causing pneumonia. And so what I see about flu shots is that we're reducing that risk. Now, I also know influenza vaccine is a highly personal decision, and each family is going to make the decision that is right for them as individuals. But our goal is to prevent severity of infection from influenza, and the way how we can do that is with the flu shot. Now, something I hear really commonly in clinic is, well, my child still gets sick, 100%. There are so many viruses over flu and viral season. This is only trying to protect against a few types of those viruses that are out there. But we know influenza is one of the viruses that can settle in the lungs, particularly if you have muscle weakness. And just to spearhead from that, I hear a lot about RSV vaccines, and I have a lot of families requesting RSV vaccines. And the challenge right now is we don't have any evidence about, and it hasn't been studied in individuals who are under 18 years of age. So right now, from an RSV standpoint, we do not have a vaccine for that pediatric age group. I'm hoping that will change in the future, but right now we don't have that. For COVID, once again, there's a lot of controversy I know out there around COVID vaccines. I recommend it, but it also it's a very personal family decision. I'd say I follow many individuals with neuromuscular conditions, I haven't had anyone that's had challenges with the COVID vaccine. And really, what we're trying to do is prevent the severity of the COVID virus settling in the lungs, causing severe illness. And that's where the COVID vaccine can be helpful. And they're also changing that vaccine every year to trying to make sure that it is covering the most common type of COVID strain that is out there.
Yes.
Question on that. Because my son actually got it, but as a caregiver, should I be getting it? Because our government's not covering it, so when we went to go do it, they didn't give it to me. Should I get it though? Because I mean, I'm sure my insurance covers it and all that stuff. Should, as a caregiver, I be getting the COVID?
So, once again, my personal opinion, the answer is yes, because we're trying to protect within the families, but I also know that this is a personal decision within families, and I follow families that do and don't get it. But I think if we can create, because you're going to be in direct contact with your child, and I know we can't protect about with everyone that they're in contact when we're thinking about schools and community and recreation, but just trying to create as much protection as possible.
There's a question there.
My question is more regarding the slide on the diet part, right? We talk a lot about diet, but in my experience with my kid, I have found it difficulty in terms of getting the right resources to search on what kind of a diet is more suitable for kids with Duchenne. And the typical answer I would get whenever I talk to my neuromuscular team is, have a simple diet, whatever you eat at home, right? But then again, with Duchenne, we still want to have a stable diet so that when the kid goes on steroids, it's better managed. But like, are there any recommended dietitians out there which specifically deals with Duchenne, which we as parents can reach out and say, hey, you know what, we need a plan, not just for now, for the future, and where to find that resource?
Excellent question. I wish I had an excellent answer for that. So it is very hard. So there's no specific Duchenne specific diet that is out there that is recommended. And so a lot of what we talk about is having a balanced diet. I find some children may not have enough protein in their diet, and that's where really any dietitian would be helpful for looking at what they're currently eating and just making sure that balance is there. And that's really kind of the key thing, making sure that there is balance within the diet. We have good calcium in the diet. And if you're not getting enough, then we supplement. The challenge, you're right, is as you get older, some of your calorie needs change over time. And that's also where it can be helpful if you have access to a dietitian. But if you don't have access to the dietitian, if you're starting to see that weight creep up, then that's telling you that some of that energy intake isn't matching the amount of energy their body is using. And that's also where I find it's helpful to, sometimes within clinics, the nurses in clinics have extra dietary knowledge, so they may be a good resource for you, or in some family healthcare teams, depending on who your primary care doctor is, there might be a dietitian there. Or if you happen to have private insurance, then sometimes you can get a dietitian to really talk about small changes. I know in our clinic, we just have a dietitian. I'd been advocating for approximately 18 years, and so I finally have a dietitian on the team. And really what I learned from her is just these small little measured changes, because all of us know if we're trying to make massive dietary changes, it is not going to work. We are going to fail within, I don't know, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. And so I think just having that ongoing thought process and thinking about the calorie density. So there are a lot of really healthy foods out there, but they also can have a high calorie density. And so if you are noticing an increase in weight, trying to make some substitutions within that. And I think there aren't any broad general rules because we know everybody's diet is different. And one thing I just want to highlight, because I know that many individuals with Duchenne also have autism or they have selective eating. And so if you're finding that the number of foods they're eating is going down, then talking with either your neuromuscular team or your primary care team, because sometimes you need to do some nutritional blood work. And I think I've only become really aware of this in the last couple of years. And I found some some concerning deficiencies, like micronutrient deficiencies. So if any of you have individuals in your family or who happen to have Duchenne or Becker's that are highly selective, highlight this to your physicians, because you may need to have some screening blood work. Sorry, not a really good answer, but okay.
Okay, here.
Thank you very much for stressing that the internet or Dr. Google are not necessarily accurate sources of information. I've seen many families this morning writing quite frantically, and you usually miss something while you're doing that writing and taking pictures of the screens as a new slide popped up. I'm just wondering, from a technical standpoint, is the information that appeared in your slide decks available to all the people in this room, and where would they find those things?
Well, anyone from Defeat Duchenne can speak to me, or can speak about it, but I know that this is being taped. I know that people can watch it after, so if there's something that you're interested in rehearing, or if you think you've missed it, you can absolutely watch it online. There's usually a little bit of a delay before it is available online, but Defeat Duchenne has always been excellent with making sure these talks are widely available. I have a sheet with some of the resources. It absolutely won't have all of them, but that's also available through Defeat Duchenne, and I have some good old paper copies if that's helpful for people who are here. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Have a question here. Are we good on time? I love that we have a questions, so I will be great to continue, but.
We're about 20 minutes over time, but it's okay. But maybe we'll take the last two.
Okay, so last two guys, like just orders from the chief here, so.
I just had one more question when it came to the supplements and the calcium and vitamin D. It's just right now, when I get plain calcium and vitamin D, well, then you go to pharmacy, calcium kits, chewable, and then you go online, and there's like so many different options, and everyone is telling this one's better than the other. And like, you know, like I'm just looking for some kind of confirmation where's the right answer when it comes to the supplements, especially the vitamin D and the calcium.
So in general, I recommend 1,000 units of vitamin D, because we just do not, so our body can make vitamin D through sunlight, but we just don't have enough of that. So, so whatever combination, we want approximately 1,000 a day of vitamin D. Now, vitamin D can hide in different places. So if your child is on a multivitamin, most multivitamins have 400 units in it. So I want to make sure that when you're thinking about vitamin D, you're kind of looking at anything else. And I'm not saying you have to be on a multivitamin, but if you happen to be, it hides in there as well. Now, calcium is a little bit tricky, and if you want, we can talk about it later, because it also depends on how much is in your diet. So if you are meeting your calcium needs through your diet, you do not need a supplement. You need your vitamin D, that helps your body absorb calcium, but if you have enough through what you're eating, so calcium is in many different foods. Milk, yogurt, cheese are common, cashews, any of the milk alternatives have calcium supplements in it. And also your calcium needs vary based on your age. And so when you're younger, you need less calcium than when you're a little bit older. So I don't have that on my resource sheet, but I can definitely let Defeat Duchenne know if there's a good website to help with that. Okay?
Also need to add, like, be careful exactly with not extra calcium, because some patients might develop kidney stones, and that might be a complication, especially in the teenagers with Duchenne. So talk eventually with your bone health or your primary neuromuscular person. If they have a bone health person there as well, it's going to tell you the same thing. If the diet is enough with calcium, not to give. Last questions over there that I promised, all yours.
Great, thank you. If I could just share from personal family experience in this past year and a bit on the nutrition side of the house, and we're closing in on Halloween here. We were borderline non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and after really deep diving the diet with our dietitian and team, realized that the biggest poison was the high fructose corn syrup, and that includes even in the chewable multivitamin, because we want to flavor it for well, not just for our kids, but for everybody to take your vitamins because it tastes delicious. We're actually inadvertently poisoning our bodies. Our bodies cannot process that high fructose corn syrup. It's then stored in the body. So being mindful of however our foods are, like the classic bear paw treat for lunch was eliminated. And just being deliberate and replacing with the healthier sugars, I guess, that our bodies can actually process naturally, reverse that non-alcoholic fatty liver diagnosis or that borderline to being metabolically healthy again. So it's those little changes, and it doesn't happen overnight. And again, it does take discipline to make those changes, but in the long run, paid off.
Thank you so much for your comment. Okay, now we're done. We're going to get lunch and the exhibitions and the sponsor. Please go and get like tasty lunch, everybody.